Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clockedin with me, your host, Jordan Edwards. I'm thrilled to have you tune in as we dive into the dynamic world of productivity, success, and stories of incredible individuals who've mastered the art of getting things done. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing at home, this podcast is the go-to source for inspiration and actionable tips to level up your productivity game. I'm on a mission to unravel the secrets of those who seem to effortlessly manage their time and achieve their goals. So if you're ready to clock in and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. We've got a lineup of amazing guests, industry experts, and thought leaders who will share their insights and strategies to help us crush your to-do list and make the most out of every moment. Get ready to get inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to supercharge your productivity. This is Clockedin with Jordan Edwards. Let's dive in. Hey, what's going on? We got a special guest here. He's actually here for the second time. This is Peter Demos. He's a restaurateur. He's a fourth generation business leader. He's got 2 books out. He's a lawyer, and then he hopped into the restaurant space, and he's involved in ministry, business, teacher, family, and most importantly, he's a soccer coach on the side as well. I don't know how he does it. He's in everything. Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. So I'm really excited to have you back. I understand that you got the new book. We'll touch on that. But to start off, what are you seeing in the world right now? Because it's been probably 18 months since we had you on the podcast last, and the world is ever changing.
It's funny because I've had this conversation with many people. It's been very frustrating in the restaurant business because we've been one restaurant's been around for 30 years. And we're like, it's just the knowledge has gone away. Like all these people have just doesn't seem to understand basic stuff like lighting the pilot light on a piece of equipment. We called an equipment person out and get charged $200 for them to light the pilot light. And we're getting frustrated, like, why? We've been doing this for this long. Like, how does this happen? And we realized when we lost so much staff during COVID, that bringing back on, we don't have a 30-year history. We have a 2-year history. And so in every business seems like in every relationship that's outside of like one of a person you lived with or, maybe close family members, but almost every relationship is a 2-year relationship, even if you've been around longer, because so much of it's different. I had a meeting with a distributor just about a couple of hours ago, and so much has changed in how we progressed and worked it out. And it's like they just didn't remember certain standards. And there was just all these different things because everything's new to everybody. And then you're battling, inflation, you're battling gas prices, you're battling labor shortage, you're battling supply chain problems, you're battling all this stuff is battling. And it's just like, you just seem like you just can't get on top of the hill. And it's instead of trying, just accept the fact that, okay, the hill's big, let's just do it one step at a time. And then eventually we'll get to the top. Even the hill's growing, we'll get to the top, just doing one step at a time, because that's all we can do. And it's just, it's frustrating, but that's all that can happen right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild time. You're touching on a lot of different areas as well. So what is one of the ways that you kind of protect yourself from a recession or inflation or any of these things? Because a lot of us are sitting there like, dude, I'm still making the same salary I was before. How am I supposed to compete? How am I supposed to keep up? You can't. 10% inflation, you can't.
No, especially, and that's the funny thing. In the past, when you'd have inflation or you have different things, it was either food driven or product driven, I should say, cost of goods driven or labor driven. And now it's both. Both are rising. And, and the closest that we've seen in most of our generation was probably the mid 70s in that era. It was kind of the closest where that happened. But prior to that, it was decades before that. So we don't have even people that lived through it that we can get advice from and talk to. So what we've done is that there's 3 areas that we look at, or that I look at in doing it. The first thing is you to me, the Bible is the best business book out there. And I get more ideas reading my Bible systematically, in addition to the fact that it's emotional and we can pretend and we can all like puff our chest out and like, I'm the boss and we can do all that stuff. But in reality is when we're lying in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's when you start to crash and burn, or you're taking that shower and you're just like, I can't believe I got to do this today. Those type of feelings that everybody goes through. And you have to have that type of support. So again, that kind of refreshes your soul and your spirit, and just kind of helps energize you from that side. The second thing is your mind. You have to be educated, and we're constantly looking and anticipating what's happening and what's going on out there. So when we started seeing the supply chain problem, this is where I can apply both of these lessons. We started seeing a major supply chain problem. And so we created the Genesis 41 plan. And in Genesis 41, Joseph tells Pharaoh, you got 7 years of good and 7 years of famine, so you better start stockpiling. And so that's what we started doing. We started stockpiling all of our non-perishables, and we kept 4 weeks supply in storage units that we have everywhere. And it kept us from running out of product. It kept us from running out, so we could do catering. Last year, they ran out of pans for us to do catering. Well, we had them. We had a supply. We had 4 weeks supply to get through what was needed. They ran out of trash bags, and we were able to do that. But again, we're looking and anticipating. And if we see an issue, like there's a diesel crisis right now that's happening on the southeastern part so we've reached out to our vendors and like, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, well, we hadn't heard about it. And we're like, okay, so we help in that area. And then thirdly we do the best to kind of try to diversify as much as possible. So like we have one full service restaurant concept, one fast casual restaurant concept, try to do commercial leasing that wouldn't involve restaurants. So we own real estate for that. And then as you said, I teach, I do other things. So, so I'm an adjunct professor at Lipscomb. And so, so I have that as an avenue to fall back on. So if everything crashes and burns and the restaurants go out of business, I'm not sitting there saying, okay, now what do I do? So I always kind of want to be prepared for these type of events, and have the knowledge and experience that I can shift if I need to shift to be able to take care of my family the way I need to take care of them.
Yeah, I love that. And the preparation is one of the biggest things, especially, which a lot of people don't talk about, which is preparation of our mind, which is what you touched on. And in regard to the Bible, when did that become prevalent to you? When was that a big area for you?
It was about 10 years ago, not quite 10. I'll celebrate my 10th birthday in May. But it was about 10 years ago, is when I got saved. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up going to church, went to Christian schools, but wasn't a Christian. Matter of fact, I said I was a Christian, but I really wasn't a Christian. In fact, I would actually go after Christians and make fun of them and challenge them on different things and different quotes of the Bible, and try to mess with them. And it was a good day if I could make a Christian cry for a period of time. And then when God got a hold of me, and the kind of the Saul of Tarsus type thing that kind of knocked me off my horse, is when I said, okay, we're turning everything over to you. And then as I started reading the Bible systematically, and not kind of Bible roulette, where you just kind of like, oh, I'm opening to this verse today. It's incredible how often God will put answers in front of you that you didn't realize you were even searching. And you're just like, you look at it and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is incredible. And so, in fact, that's kind of where, the first book that I wrote, there's a lot in there of how God kind of taught me through the Bible of how to deal with failure, how to deal with, when things, everyone starts to kind of, the stuff you lean on gets stripped away. And then the second book was in relation to, it actually started as a research project. I was just like, do Christians have a duty to report crime? It was just an interesting little thought process I had. It was more academic. And it started leading into the idea of, do Christians have a duty of civil disobedience? And then 2020 happened, and you started seeing like churches getting closed down, and all this stuff happening everywhere, and and these attacks upon faith and attacks upon Christians. And I was like, wow, this needs to happen. And so I literally outlined the book and wrote it very quickly. The book has just recently been published, but it was actually has a publication date of 2021, but we couldn't get it out because the printers can't get paper. So we were kind of, so our publisher had everything ready to go, and literally like they ran out of paper. One of them got cyber attacked. They ran out of ink. And so the supply chain problem came crashing down around us in that area as well. So I mean, it's just crazy. It's just, you don't realize the stuff that the little stuff that you don't know that impacts the big stuff that impacts your life. And so that's where part of that comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it fascinating how curious you are, because as you've amassed, in my opinion, I think you've done a lot of different things at a very high level. And most of the time, people in that position can be, I know everything, I understand, I know what's happening. And you're the complete opposite. You're actually like, please teach me. I want to learn, which I find incredible. How has this curiousness helped you in your life?
Well, it's hurt me in my life too. Sometimes you ask the wrong questions to the wrong people, and I think ultimately, it's when you ask questions, and not just within myself, but when I ask questions of other people too, and not only for my own knowledge, but for theirs as well. It leads to conversations. And I think so much of these last 2 years, we have seen the absence of conversation, the absence of everyone is so worried about their image. And I think it's really kind of, we had the problem before, but with social media and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, that image is there. Well, when we define ourselves and we look at ourselves as the image, and that's who we are, and somebody comes along and attacks your image, we have the right to self-defend. And and that's how it feels. You are killing me because you're killing who I've now identified with, which is the image that I put out there on Facebook, the image I put out on Instagram. And so I can't be wrong. So as opposed to saying, I get the periodic person that'll come after me on Twitter, and most of the time I will respond with questions to ask them about something. They'll say, well, Christians have never been persecuted. And then my response to them is, well, how do you define persecution? So what do you do here? So I kind of start with how they define things. I don't accept, kind of what they start as a basis of truth. I want to first figure out what criteria they're coming from. And it helps me be able to frame a conversation that we have. Now, most of the time they don't want to have the conversation. They won't answer the questions. And that's the Twitter world. That's, but face-to-face conversations, it works the same way. You can ask these questions and you can find out a whole lot about somebody and why they think things, which leads to sometimes greater conversations to help people kind of just to help other people with life. And then the same thing's true when I see something and I'm just like, I don't know. I want to know why. It can be, I was watching Homeward Bound with my kids a long time ago, and one of the dogs got hit with a porcupine, and they're like, "Are porcupines poisonous?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And and so this is before, this is when like you had, I don't even think Google was around. My Google may have just started, but I was using web crawler, and trying to find out if porcupines were poisonous. But even before that, I would make a list of things and go to a library and look it up, and just because I like information. I always think information leads to something, and if not, you're a great Trivial Pursuit player, so.
Absolutely. I think you brought up one of the best points is that when there's someone attacking you or when someone's coming in at a very hot, in the regard of they're bringing a negative energy or they're trying to prove something wrong, if you hit them with questions, you can basically clarify the confusion, and because questions can get somebody questioning themselves. If you ask questions correctly, you can get the person, if they have a strong belief, you can get them questioning their own belief to the point where they're like, oh, wait, maybe he's got a point. How does that even work? But if you're just making statement after statement after statement back, it's never going to be it's an argument.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And the problem I'm seeing now with many people of kind of a younger generation, it's amazing with all the information. We had this information revolution, and with all this information out there, it feels like the majority of people, at least the ones I come in contact with, I don't know if it's true as a whole or not, but it feels like the majority of people I come in contact with get all their information from a meme. Their theology is from a meme, their politics is from a meme, their social status is from a meme, and they spout off these 1-2 second lines, and then when you ask them the question, no one's ever asked them the question before, and no one's ever challenged them past that funny looking face, with a funny looking saying or the funny saying, so it creates that. An example. we had a person I ran in contact with recently, and they said they were a pescatarian. They're not a Christian, but they made a comment they're pescatarian, and I said, so I'm just curious, like why? Is there a particular reason? Because again, I like fish, but not to eat it all the time. Like I won't beef, I won't chicken, I won't pork. I mean, so I was just like, why? I'm just curious, what's your reason for that? And she said, well, I don't think fish have souls. And I said, well, then can I deduce from that you think dogs have souls? Yes. And then cows have souls? Yes. I said, okay. I said, well, then what is a soul? And she went, I don't know. No one's ever asked me. And I said, okay, well, cool. Why don't you go look it up? The next time I'm back, we can have another conversation. And so the next time I saw her, we had the conversation, and it then led to, well, what's the difference between a soul and a spirit? I don't know. Okay, well, go look that up, and then we'll have another conversation. So we've been able to have conversations where I'm not like forcing anything on her. And, and again, my job is not to convert people. Jesus didn't tell us to make converts. He told us to share the good news of the kingdom and make disciples. So she's not a Christian. So I can't, it's not my job to convert her. I can't make her a disciple because she's not a Christian. But I can at least get her to start thinking, and so that I have an opportunity and opens the door for me to share those good news. But it also gave me credibility. So when I go and teach her something from work, she now has credibility that I'm there to try to find a real solution. I'm not coming in and being like, I'm the boss, you have to do that. I'm not like that, And so even though it may come across that way, because you're in the heat of the battle and I need something done and I say it, she knows that I care deeper than just the instruction of which I'm giving.
I think that is absolutely huge, because what ends up happening is when managers just tell instead of conversating, and I see this happening all the time with different people, where they might have someone who's really good at a job, they get promoted, they're now the manager, but they don't know how to manage anything. And they sit there and they go, oh, it's the same thing. You just tell people what people don't appreciate being told what to do. How about you have a conversation? It's slightly different.
There's something called the Peters principle, named after Lawrence Peters. And the Peters principle is that everyone is promoted to the level of their own incompetence. And that happens. You're right. You get promoted up to a level, and then when you can't do that level, you no longer get promoted, but they don't demote you back down. So then you're stuck. So then you're kind of stuck at that level of incompetence. Now you might be able to grow through it. You might have a boss that can help you get through it, but eventually at some point in time, you're going to stop. I mean, I played baseball in Little League. I mean, I was awesome at T-ball. I was awesome at kid pitch, coach pitch. I became good. Then I'm sorry, coach pitch, I was good. Kid pitch, I became kind of good. Then they started introducing the fastball, and I became kind of average to below average. Eventually, I got moved up to a level where I couldn't play anymore. Like I couldn't make the team, but I was an awesome T-ball player.
I mean, it's so true it really is that people end up in their certain situations. So for yourself and your journey, like when you were taking over the restaurant group, what was your thoughts on that? And how did your focus on having a succinct goal of wanting to grow this, whatever this means, how did that help you?
So when I first came back, when I came and talked to my father and said, I want to come back, and my father was in the process, I was unaware of this, but he was in the process of looking for someone to buy it anyway. So it helped me. So that became an easy answer for both of us. But I told him, I said, the only reason I'm going to do this is if we can grow it. And because it is an outstanding concept. It's a great restaurant. We have great systems in place. We open up a third location and a fourth location, but I noticed that every time we seem to kind of get further away, that the systems start to fail. And then so we tried different avenues. We opened up another location. We closed one and we opened up another one. And because one of the problems was too is our fifth location we opened in December of 2008. Well, in a rural town on top of that. So, there was unemployment of 22%. The Home Depot almost closed in that town. The Toys R Us did close in that town. It was one of the first ones to close. Wow. So So, I mean, it was impacted significantly by the economy at that time. So we were like, well, maybe that's the reason. But we also knew that operationally it wasn't a strong concept there. And then so we tried it somewhere else. It was also a little closer, and we hired and got better people in place. We created the people levels of it. And then it was the same type of thing. And then we recognized the systems are strong because we were doing it for 30 years. So there was built upon knowledge that the new person learned from the old person, that learned from the old person. So as a result, and as we made changes, but we were coming in brand new, there was just too many and it was too complex. So we're like, okay, well, then this is not the avenue of growth. So we said, okay, we're going to grow. And so now we've opened up a fast casual restaurant. The systems are easy. People can understand. When it crashes, we literally get it out in 5 to 10 minutes. It's a great franchisable concept. So we're opening up our third location once we get that in. And once we do that, we're going to look at possibly franchising it and having other people grow it. So that's another way of growing. And then there is okay, well, what happens if all the restaurants just have to go under for different reasons? We saw, 2020, the impact it had on restaurants. And, I mean, at one time, President Trump was saying, don't eat at restaurants, they're super spreaders. And then, then later he came back and said, no, it's okay to eat at restaurants. But during that moment, you're like, well, what happens if my entire livelihood goes away just like that? What happens? So what do we have to do? So we were always kind of like slightly involved in commercial real estate, but then we said, okay, well, we're going to now start using and start expanding in that area. This is when I started, expanding, again, with trying to write books and doing things of that nature. And then someone has said, hey, we'd love for you to be an adjunct professor here at Lipscomb. And I'm like, absolutely. Because again, at some point in time, I'm physically not going to be able to do some of the stuff I can do. And when that happens, I want to be able to, again, still be able to provide. And I think we started looking at growth instead of one way of growing. We're going to try to grow the bottom line of all the companies together. So, one company might bring in, just a small amount of money, but that's okay. It's still adding and contributing to the cash. It's still adding to the bottom line. A friend of mine told me a long time, he said, sales are for vanity. He said, but profits are for sanity. And so, and I really love that thought process, which is that. So it's not always sales. It's not always the recognition. And, wow, look, I'm the size of McDonald's, which again, I have a lot of respect for. It's amazing how they did what they did. But I know I don't have the ability to do that. I'm not saying our concept doesn't, but I don't have the ability to take them to that level. But I do have the ability to kind of lay, again, a lot of stuff in place and try to find the right people to be able to do it. And that's kind of what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, it's incredible. So when did you make the jump with commercial real estate?
When?
What?
I didn't hear. I'm sorry. What was the question? I'm sorry.
When did you make the jump with commercial real estate?
So funny thing is, it kind of started. So we started originally for estate planning. We bought the buildings and leased it back to ourselves to a different company. So we had a real estate company that was there. It was only leasing back to ourselves. So, but that was again for estate planning purposes. So my sister and I created that because at that time my father owned the restaurant, and the estate taxes were very high. And so therefore we had other avenues to, while we collected the rent and saved the cash, it was really to be able to pay off estate taxes. So that was how we actually got in it. But technically that's not really the same thing. I mean, I could have, what I'm saying? So, but we had the real estate companies. And then we had in my first book, Afraid to Trust, we talk about the failure of one of our restaurants that we had. But in that process, the way God kind of got us through it was someone came along and said, hey, I want to lease it from you. We're like, okay, well, we already had the company that's set up and ready to do that type of stuff. We said, sure, we're going to do that. And then another opportunity presented it before itself. It was it's a building that was near ours and already had it. And someone approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? Absolutely. So we went ahead and bought this building and it already had tenants in it, pre-done, et cetera, from there. Now we're looking at, it was a residential rental place, it's actually further out that we're doing. So it's like God is kind of putting these things in front of us and we're just saying, yes, it's one of those. We looked at doing, and we were very close to doing a a Venture X franchise, which is kind of like a Regus WeWork type thing, or shared office space. And we actually bought the franchise rights for the Middle Tennessee market. And we kept hitting obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And I remember a friend of mine telling me a long time ago, if you can't, if all these obstacles keep getting in the way, you need to ask God, what are you doing? And we did. We prayed about it, and we were like, we need to get out of it. And we had to. I mean, that was just the only thing. I mean, I tell this story a lot of times, which is we got a desk from it. It was like the sample desk that they sent, and we got the sample desk that they had. But we paid $75,000 for the territory and franchise fees, and so. Anyway, I got a $75,000 desk. So if any of your listeners wants a great deal on it, I'll sell it to them for $50,000. I mean, that's a third off. It's an awesome desk. It rises and goes down. So $50,000 desk is yours. Any of your listeners want it, it's all yours. But that was just one of the real estate mistakes we made. So that's how it ended up happening.
No, absolutely. And I think having the desk there is also a great reminder of
yes.
teaching the lessons. I probably still use the desk. You're like, it's a nice desk. Why not? But it has that reminder of, hey, like, we always need to be aware, and maybe we're feeling like we're going in a right direction or a wrong direction or whatever direction, but we really got to be able to make that decision. Like I find with myself, there's so many aspects to life. Like there's a lot of different pieces in life. And it's like, is this my place? Am I going in the right direction? Am I here? Am I there? And you start sitting there and you're like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. I'm all trying to figure it out. And I think each of the experiences we have is a learning for us for the future, and it helps us. And that's one of the things I really like about you is that you're so adventurous in different ways. And it really opens up who is Peter Demos? Like, who is this person? You know what I mean? Because there's so many aspects. It's pretty awesome.
As you grow and you have different life experiences, you start to, I don't know what the right word is, you start to kind of almost mutate to those experiences. And you can either mutate in fear and pull back, or you can go out and step forward and trust and say, God, I trust that you have a plan in my life. And, and you ask, who am I? To me, that's a simple answer. I'm a child of God. I can't change that. What I do with it is, and the tools that he's given me is now that is kind of a partnership I have with him. But I can't change who I am. I'm a child of God. I can't change my purpose in life. My purpose is to glorify him. But the way in which I do it, that involves free will, and that involves some of the free choices that one has. So I do think that, when we're faced with different things, obviously, again, COVID changed the lives of many people out there. And and you see that as it's evidence when people are wearing a mask, today, in their car alone, when you see that type of stuff, you realize which direction they took with it. I'm not saying they're wrong or evil or anything else like that. But it's not the choices that I'm making, and so, but I do think that we react to our circumstances, and unfortunately, sometimes we by giving into the circumstances, then and lacking that trust and adding more fear to our lives. But I also think that's what's created so much anxiety and so much of the new phrase of it, mental health issues that we have everywhere. And there's legitimate mental health issues out there, but there's also, it's a masking, it's a nicer way of saying, they have anxiety or they have a panic attack or they're just scared, but again, there's a range that goes in mental health. So I'm not denigrating people that have like a sincere, like schizophrenia or something like, I'm not denigrating that because I know those out there, but I think a lot of times people use that term in order to really just mask the fact that they're afraid and they just don't want to step forward from it.
Yeah, we're not mental health experts, but I do agree in the regard. I can only speak for myself. What I found is that when you sit in that, like, and you say it out loud, I'm depressed, or I have anxiety, or I have this issue, or I have that issue, it's likely to come true. Like, right. If you say I'm the best, it's likely to come true. Like, whatever you put out in the world is going to come to you. And when you put yourself in a negative state like that, it's just something that you have to be aware about, because you have the ability to change in a minute. And that's what I always tell everyone is like, today's November 1st. I am Jordan Edwards of November 1st, 2022 at 4:00. Who am I going to be at November 2nd?
Right.
I don't like, we are constantly changing. It's never the same. And we're always open to new experiences. And I think that's one of the keys.
You know, I remember when I was in college, I just left to go to college, and there was my high school sweetheart broke my heart, like terrible, like hard. And then for the next like couple months, like I couldn't get over it. I was depressed, and I just kept giving into those feelings of sadness and everything. And then it's like, okay, I want to start asking people out, and everyone kept saying no. I mean, it was just no, we're not with you, you know. and so my best friend, who been my best friend since I was 15 years old, and she looked at me one time and she said, "Well, I don't blame him. I wouldn't go out with you either." And you know, kind of stunned me a little bit. Like I wanted somebody to feel sorry for me. And she's like, "I don't blame you." She goes, "Look at how you act." She's like, you have no confidence whatsoever. You act this way. So I said, okay. There was a girl that was in one of my classes I was just friends with. And I said, every time I'm around this girl, I'm going to act arrogant and cocky. Now, I might go back to my dorm room and cry in a bag of Cheetos. I mean, that's one thing. But when I'm around her, I'm going to be overboard. I'm going to be arrogant and cocky. What was funny was not only did I enjoy myself more around her after a while, I stopped crying, you know, and having those problems back, you know, when I was by myself, but I ended up dating every one of her friends. You know, because so it's just true. It's sometimes you got to have to convince yourself that I'm okay, even when you don't feel it, because the feelings are real, but not necessarily true. And once we make that distinction between reality and truth, it really changes things up. You know, I can get caught up in the self-pity of no one likes me. You know, people are getting mad at me on Twitter. People don't like my comments like they like other people's. I can get caught up in that. The feeling is real, but then I can look at it and say, you know what, I'm so busy and people are calling me, asking me to breakfast or asking me to lunch all the time. So it's not really true, but it feels true, but it's not real. It's not true. The feelings are, but the facts aren't. And sometimes you got to move it from that feeling state to your headspace. I mean, the Bible says in Jeremiah, your heart is desperately wicked and deceitful among all things. And I think, you know, and I think that's another just verse that just always sticks with me because it is your feelings will kind of get you convinced. I mean, I can't think of how many times I looked at my wife and be like, this is terrible. This is, you know, awful. You're treating me poorly. And then I start writing down things that she does that's positive, that she does great for me. And all of a sudden she gets better. She doesn't get better. My attitude has changed. And, you know, and so now, you know, and we've been married now 23 years. Yeah, 23 years. You know, and so, I mean, it's incredible now, but part of it is because you have to change your attitude to change your outlook.
Absolutely. I think the part you brought up about your wife, and it was your perspective, is taking the accountability. And it's one of the biggest things. And whenever you feel conflicted because you're getting frustrated and you're like, I don't know why I'm frustrated. And it happens to me all the time where I'm like, I don't know why I'm frustrated. And then you just sit there in a space where I call it gratitude, but it's basically where we sit there and we go, okay, well, I like this. I like this. I like this. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. Like I have a life. I'm living. I'm doing this. And you start to get this whole new perspective. And Tony Robbins says it, but he basically says you can't be grateful and angry at the same time.
Right.
And it's like, okay, if you're angry, start getting grateful.
Well, and it works. I mean, and that's, you know, again, in my first book, the Afraid to Trust book, you know, that was what I had to learn, is that when you start being thankful, you know, then you could submit your request to God. And I love the verse that follows that, where it says, and he will give you a peace that's beyond understanding. And it's absolutely true. I mean, and sometimes when you're writing down that thankful list, you can't come up with the first couple of things. So you got to have to be really creative. Like I live in a community where there's a grocery store on, you know, almost every corner. You know, in that grocery store, there's an aisle full of cookies, and there's like half the aisle's Oreos. I mean, you can start, but once you start the thankfulness piece of it, then all of a sudden real stuff starts to come in play as well. And you don't have to kind of create it. We start all of our senior executive meetings. We all started off with the positive focus. And we're like, okay, name 3 positive things that's happened over the last month. And it has transformed. It's been interesting. It's transformed into 3 business things, to 2 personal, or 2 business and 1 personal, which I find interesting that I never changed it. People just started doing it, and they will list these positive things. And it just starts the meeting off completely different. The whole meeting can be a terrible, bad meeting, and you were all terrible people meeting. But it starts off, and they don't walk away with it always that way, because we started off with something positive, and we talked about their progress and their successes they made. And it just changes how the meetings actually conduct themselves from there.
It's one of the biggest tips for anybody that runs any sort of meeting, is to have that differentiator, whether it's, hey, tell me about a win that's going on, or you could have a thought-provoking question of, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Simple as that. Or it could be as deep as, what do you think the purpose of life is? Like, why are you doing it? Like, you can take it in any direction, but if you do that question/win in the start of the meeting, it will get the emotional rapport of the group to be exponentially higher than, tell me what you're working on today. Like, right, it's a completely different feel. It is drastic. And I'm really, that's cool that you do that, especially the personal note, because it means that it's fostering family dynamic, which is very, very powerful.
Well, and again, meetings, and I love Patrick Lencioni's book, Death by Meeting, because in that book, he says, meetings ought to have conflict. And we ought to be able to have that conversation that's back and forth type of conflict and conversation. We got to not let it go to a destructive side of it. There has to be some type of facilitator involved in it, or, you got to be able to say, well, we're going to stop, we're going to table it, we're going to address it later, whatever the situation is. But I think that having that conflict is healthy, because at least you feel heard at that point. That's at least the worst of it. You feel heard. But yeah, meetings ought to, and I've had other people come from the outside and they're like, this is really weird. Like, you all like kind of make fun of each other and everyone seems to think it's okay. And like, because it is, we're not that sensitive. Our egos aren't that big.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So in regard to the second book, The Duty of a Christian Civil Disobedience, what was the purpose of that? Why is this important?
So again, as I said, I started out just kind of an academic thought process, which just kind of led me to it. I was a sociology major in college. And so I had an emphasis in race and ethnic relations. I had a minor in political science. And so the idea of civil disobedience and the history of civil disobedience, and to affect political change, to affect other types of change, to me was very fascinating already. So I already studied the lives of Gandhi, Mandela, Martin Luther King. So to me, that was already kind of important. But then when I started seeing again the stuff that was happening, and again the focus and attention that was going on churches, and I realized again in the Bible where it says, basically, Christians are going to be under attack, and as the end of times comes, we're going to see a greater revival and a greater amount of evil that rises at the same time. And so, whether it's going to be my lifetime, my kids, grandkids, or whatever, I know that today I'm closer to the end of times than I was yesterday. So again, where that ends, I don't know, but we know there's a beginning and an end. And then Christians, there is never an end. We just change locations. And so I guess for non-Christians, they change locations too, but really, but ultimately that's kind of how that works. So, but when I started seeing it, I realized we don't know how to respond, especially in Western culture, because we've been so used to, kind of being the cultural norm, and now we're no longer the cultural norm. And so from that, we need to understand, and I felt it was important that we needed to show people that when to be able to protest certain things. We don't need to be the type of people that's like, I'm not paying my taxes because I don't like President Biden, or I'm not going to do it because I don't like President Trump. It's not that, but it is okay, so when do we say we're not going to follow this anymore? When do we say we're going to stand up for what I believe in and recognize there's going to be consequences for it? In North Carolina, there was a soccer player there, and she refused to wear a Pride jersey. Daniel, her name is Daniels, can't remember her first name, but she said, I can't do that. I can't go out and play in that jersey because it's against my faith. And, they ended up cutting her. She knew there was going to be that consequence. There was a lady up at CVS up in somewhere in the Northeast who got fired because she's like, I'll give every drug out there, but I can't give abortion, drugs. I can't do that. And they terminated her for it. But those are examples of civil disobedience where they're just like, I just can't do it. I'm not going to protest. I'm not going to write all these nasty things on social media and do all this stuff. I don't have to add to the noise. I'm just going to say, look, I can't do it. But we need to understand when that's the case and when that's not the case, so that we can do it from a biblical perspective on it. And so I kind of go through the book and talk about civil disobedience from John Rawls and Henry David Thoreau and kind of give an example of it, and even use, again, non-Christians to show, how civil disobedience worked, and then bring it into a biblical context, and even then use Jesus as the test to say, okay, if Jesus doesn't do it, then the test fails. And so I use the life of Jesus as applying that test to show how it does work and how this test works. Because I think if we're not prepared for it, then I think we're just going to get run over, and our meekness is going to be confused with weakness, and we'll confuse ourselves.
Wow. Well, one of the most impressive things about you is the amount of preparation you put in to every aspect of your life, whether it's the business protection, it's raising your children, it's whatever it is. I find it really awesome, the amount of preparation you have, because you're talking about a topic that is, for some of these people, it is a one-time action where it's, hey, if I stand up for this right now, like that soccer player, she's like, I'm off the team. Like, she didn't know that was the repercussions, but that's what ended up occurring. And you sit there and you go, you should be prepared to make that decision when that time has come. Because
Right,
I've
yes.
always found if you think through the decisions, then you're in a much better place than when you get put on the spot and you're like, I don't even know how to handle this.
Well, here's an example. My daughter, it's her first year in college. She goes into her biology class. Her very first day of homework, it said, using the scientific method, prove the flaws of intelligent design. In other words, using the scientific method, prove that God didn't exist. That was her first day of homework. Now there is the challenge. We were texting literally like 5 minutes before you called. We were texting back and forth because her biology professor is talking about how people that don't believe in evolution are stupid, and and all this other stuff. And she's had to answer these questions, on the homework, which are the correct answer, because scientific method actually proves there is a creator. It doesn't necessarily prove there's a Christian creator, but it does prove that there is a creator. It doesn't prove that there is a God of some kind. And then we can deduce from that where there is a Christian God. But because we had these conversations, and I recognized a couple of years ago, I didn't prepare them early on of how to defend their faith. And so we said, okay, I've got to do that. So 3 years ago, because my son went a year early. So so we started then of really hitting on the kind of understanding some of these challenges that the professors are going to put, but also more importantly, explaining, yeah, you can fail the test down here, but you're going to pass up there. Now, those are the two choices that I have. Or I can pass down here and fail up there. Now, does that mean if she gave the answer the professor wanted, will she not get into heaven? No, it doesn't mean that. But it does mean she'll have to answer for it. And it does mean that as her rewards are built up in heaven for what she's doing down here, by her answering correctly, then her rewards when she does die and that will be greater. And I think, again, as business people, we should have a better understanding of this than many others, which is because we're long-term thinkers. We don't expect to plant a seed and get a flower tomorrow. We know that we plant a seed, we add to fertilize it, we got to protect the weeds, and eventually we might get a flower, and then we might be able to go and get more flowers. We know that business-wise. That's why we do 5-year plans. That's why we do 10-year plans. This is nothing more than a 1,000-year plan. It's we have to plan that far in advance and recognize that, because we don't know that we'll be around for 5 years, at least on this earth. But we do know that if we do the right things, that we'll be around 1,000 years in a new world. And that's part of where it is. And so from a business perspective, we have to look at it that way and recognize we got to take some hits here. People, again, I'm not going to eat with you because you're a Christian. Okay. I'm sorry, that you're not. I want you to. I really hope you do. But I'm not going to deny God because I chose to, because I wanted a $15 meal. That's just not going to be, not going to be my choice. And again, if my business closes because of it, I know that all I'm doing is getting greater reward somewhere else. And that's a big piece of it that helps me kind of get through some of that problem. And again, overcome that fear, because if I believe the Bible's true, which I do, then there's no reason why you should be holding on to all the stuff here. Now, I love the stuff here, and I hope I get to keep it all here before I go. But in reality is it's 1,000 years where I need to be focusing, not 5.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's a really interesting perspective. I like it. It's a much different perspective than what I had no idea. That's really quite interesting. Now, with your children, you mentioned them, they're in college. You're a 4th generation business owner. How does that, usually on the 3rd generation, it drops off from
Right.
my findings and like most of the internet's findings of anyone who has a business by 3rd generation, it drops off. You're 4th, they're 5th. How did you convey the values that you want to uphold? Like even the conversation we just had about your daughter's school, it's a very high level conversation. Like that is a very, yeah.
I'm not good with small children. So I never treated my children as a small child, and unfortunately, I think it kind of impacted, especially when they were in high school, I think it impacted some of their social skills a little bit too, because they're old souls, both of them are, and they fit in tremendously better in college than they do in high school. Now they had friends in high school, but they're blossoming in college, where in high school they just kind of were going through the motions and just kind of, and they were both in sports, and but even like I teach coach high school soccer, and even there, I'm just going to talk to them as if the same way I talk to you. I'm not changing who I am. I'm not changing anything about it, because I think it's important for them to know that life is out there and it's real, so we can have these conversations. Now, when they were 5, did I tell them, that we might have a nuclear war with Ukraine? No, I'm not going to create unnecessary worry. But, but I would have a conversation with them of saying, hey, we got this problem with another country. And let me kind of explain it. You remember this kid that you had a problem with, and, and the teacher had to separate you? I mean, I might kind of put it in that perspective if they heard me talking about it, but I didn't avoid it. I didn't not have the conversation. I would, again, know my audience. But I think so many times we're so focused on work. And then here's the other problem I see, and I see this again with the girls teams that I work with in particular. Actually, in the boys, it manifests differently. But what I see from them is their fathers will say and act one way, and then they see them do something different. And when you start hitting high school, that's when you start recognizing. My father has flaws too, and he's not this pedestal guy. And when the father continues again to, we talked about earlier, protecting their image, all they do is they lose credibility and creates rebellion. My kids knew where I screwed up. Now I didn't tell them all my screw ups I did. They knew that I messed up in college. I made some bad decisions in college. I'm not telling them what I did. I'm not giving them license, but they know I messed up. But they also know I messed up now. I'll come back and be like, man, I did this. I need to call and apologize to the guy. They would see those type of reactions and interactions, and I would have real conversations with them and tell them, I screwed up here. I had this problem, and let me tell you what I've done, or I still have this problem. When I get angry and I feel it kind of emotional, what I try to do is I try to kind of do this, and even though that works most of the time, not all the time, so I still trying to figure it out too. What do you do when you get angry? And then let my 16-year-old give me advice. That's important too, and I may not follow it, but at the same time, they're pretty wise, because again, we've kind of raised them in that way. As far as values like work ethic, they were just required to work. I mean, there was no option about it. It was, you went to work, you had to do your sports, now you didn't have to work 40 hours, but But my son, you want a car, you got to pay for it. Now we've helped him on the car, but he had to get his, he had to make the monthly payments. Well, he
Yeah.
couldn't do that, run cross country, do soccer, and do band. So he had to drop band in order to continue to work. So, and then he's like, hey, I can make more money doing this. So he made those decisions. My daughter the same way. She does some modeling a little bit on the side. She does DoorDash driving now, while it's her first semester in college. And so she can earn money the way that she can. That's because they don't know any different. We didn't just say, oh, hey, this is the way that you can get along just by holding a hand out. I hate entitled people. I hate them when they're entitled with their poor, and I hate it when they're entitled with their rich. I cannot stand entitled people. To me, and there's always a level of entitlement. I know there's certain things that I get that I didn't earn, but I don't have the expectation of it. And I cannot stand the people that have that expectations of entitlement. And so there's no way that I was going to ever have with my kids. And so they weren't going to be entitled because I wouldn't like them. So
I think there was a lot of main points there. One being that you treated them as not as an adult, but as you shared real conversations with them. You tried to get on a deep level instead of just, how's your day? Is everything good? Good. Move on. I'll talk to you later. Like, you actually had a real deep conversation. And the second thing I thought was really cool is a lot of the times I see parents sit in the teacher role. Teacher, student. Kid is the student. They can never learn from the student. When you flip that role like you did right there, game changer, because then they think you respect them.
Yes.
And you trust them, and what they say matters, which is the biggest thing as a child, because the majority of the time is they just want to be heard.
Right.
And everyone tells them, stop talking.
Well, especially again, when they start hitting that teenage years, and they start kind of, because when their brain starts to mature and they're getting a little bit more freedoms. And then the other problem I see so many parents have is they want to be their friend completely. And they don't realize, no, that's not how that works either. You're still their parent. I can be friends with my kid, but I'm still their parent, and even though I don't control them anymore, I don't know what time they're getting in from school, or when they go out at night, I don't know what they're doing. I have to have trust in them. They're going to do that, but I'm not going to be the one to encourage them. Hey, have the party at my house because you're going to drink anyway. No, you're still the parent. And when you do that, you lose credibility as a parent, so that, when you also have that problem, and you know what, they might be doing it anyway. I really don't think my kids are, but I don't know. I don't know what they're doing and not doing. I know my parents didn't know what I was doing and not doing. So I hope they're not. I hope I raised them correctly where they're not getting drunk at night, because, they're not 21, and getting drunk is not smart anyway. Drinking is okay, but getting drunk is, kind of just dumb. You don't feel good and you make bad decisions. Like, why does anybody think that's fun? So, but I don't know if they're doing that or not, but at this point, but I'm not going to encourage it. I'm not going to encourage decisions that might have a negative impact on their life. But at the same time, I do treat them with respect, but that's the other piece too, is I do respect them. I do trust their opinions. I do honor, I do believe that they have value that they can add to my life, because they had different life experiences than I've had. And what really sucks is when they turn what you taught them back on you. And then you're like, oh, well, whoever told you that was stupid? We can't do that either. But that does happen. And boy, when you do that, you're just like, okay, you're right. Shut up.
The accountability is everywhere. You taught them the right thing. That's awesome. That is awesome. So let me look. Yeah. So for you, what is why are you doing the teaching, and why are you doing the soccer coach? Because I know you have a successful restaurant business. You got the commercial real estate. You got enough going on. Why are you doing those two?
I love to teach people. I mean, I just love it. I love teaching young people that want to learn. So, you're not going out to the soccer. You're not going out to play soccer unless you want to be a soccer player. And the fun thing is we're not a good soccer team. We're not. We're in a bad district. We are usually the last or next to last place. We have at best have only gone one game through the divisional playoffs. We've actually created a 5-year plan. Me and the head coach have created a 5-year plan to make us to get us up a little bit better. And so we're working on that process. But the bad players that come out that still love it, and to sit down and just try to kind of teach them this, but I get to teach them other life lessons as well. Because they also go through fears and they go through anxiety and they're going through problems and their parents might be going through a divorce. And so having that and being able to show them, through the game of soccer, and then teaching them work ethic and teaching them, the value of discipline and teaching them a lot of that stuff, because some of it's being lacked. Or if the parents are teaching them, they may have tuned out the parents and they need to hear something from somebody else, a new place. Teaching in college, I'll tell you, it was a lot harder work preparing for the class than what I thought it was going to be. I thought, I give speeches all the time, I'll just, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, no, it was hard work. I now kind of feels bad for all the professors I gave a hard time to when I was in college. And so as I started kind of preparing, and then as I start teaching them, again, it's I'm not teaching the book, it's leading and managing people. And here's the book. And I'll flat out say, book's wrong. This is not how the real world works. And they even get extra credit if they can find something that's wrong in the book and bring it to me, but then, but I get to tell stories of like real stuff that happens. Like, we just recently had a class on sexual harassment and it's on protected classes, discrimination, and harassment. And I got to tell stories of some of the people I fired for sexual harassment and, and how that worked and what they did and some of the gross stuff they did. And I'm like, ladies in the class, you need to be prepared because those people are out there. Men in the class, you need to recognize that those people are out there and you might have to run across them and what you need to look for, and you need to look for these patterns and get to talk to them about it. And now, when you start building a rapport with it, now I had, people come up and asking me other questions outside of it. And just to be able to kind of pour into people and see it, the truth of the matter is I can name you probably 5-6 professors I had by name. I remember some of the classes and some of the stuff I learned, but I don't remember many of them by name, except the ones that I got to meet with after class and that taught me other things and knew that they cared about me. And again, I'm looking at kids, and I say kids, these are 20, 21-year-olds, and I'm looking at these kids that for the most part appear to have, it's Lipscomb University, so it's a private university. So the parents are they come from generally families that are more kind of business oriented families, professionally oriented families. But I get to talk to them and realize that they didn't have a lot of the same background. They didn't have a lot of the same lessons that they needed to learn. And just to be able to have these conversations and watching them learn and grasp it. And I love it when they challenge me. And, we get to have this kind of debate in class where, where I say something and have them and then encourage them and teach them how to do it professionally and respectfully, in response back. But ultimately the simple answer is I love to teach people. I love teaching a dishwasher how to wash dishes. I love teaching people how to, how the Peters principle, whatever it is. I love teaching it all along the way. I love teaching goalies how to catch the ball properly, how to jump and land without getting hurt, because it's to me, it's not the teaching itself, but then when they get it. I mean, we've had soccer games where we got mercy ruled, lost 9-0. But my goalie that I taught had 26 saves in the game, and it's a miserable game and you're angry, but I'm so excited that she got 26 saves in that game and had so many more shots on goal than that missed. And I'm like, just so proud. And she's coming off the field crying and I'm like beaming with joy because of all that she learned. And I mean, it's an awesome experience when you get to see people take that and then ultimately it just goes down to the fact that I love people in that fashion. I'm not a huggy person, so I hug. There's a sign back over here. You can't see it. It says sarcasm is my hug. But I love people in that area. And that's how I can pour into them and to see it when they get it from there. I hope that one day I get to see the fruit from that. I really do. I don't know if I will ever and will or not, but I know that at least I'm putting forth all that I can do to help other people become better, more productive members of our society.
Yeah. I love that perspective of, because as you're going there through those stories, I'm sitting there thinking, this guy is living as he exchanged time with the high school girls soccer team. So that's one generation. Then he's got the college students. That's another generation. Then he's got everyone in all of his organizations. You're touching so many different areas, and you're really making a positive impact in these people's lives. And I mean, your days are probably so funny sometimes where you're like, what am I doing? Like, you go from soccer coach to this, to that, to this. And you're like, what is this? But that's what life's all about. It's about going and impacting these people in positive manners. And I think I commend you, and I think everything you're doing is pretty awesome.
It's frightening when the high school girl, like the freshman girl, shows more maturity than some of the older people that I work with. Now, in all fairness, too, the other thing that I think is critical to this is I make certain that the people around me can do it. So, like my director of operations has been around for 26 years. We talk daily. My kitchen supervisor, married kitchen supervisor, he started with me when he was 15 years old. He's been with me 10 years. So he knows everything about the operations. We're still teaching him the admin side of the job, but he is but he kind of understands that, and so that's also has helped in that area, because without them, I don't know how I could do it. I couldn't. There's too many details to be able to do with me calling and saying, getting a 10-minute summary from somebody versus having to find it all myself, chase it down, then do it from there. And now I can limit my thing. So I have a general manager that I see a whole lot of future with. So I make certain that I'm calling him about 2 to 3 times a week and just kind of teaching him something here, asking him certain questions, because I see a potential future for him as we grow. And so I try to find the right person and then spend a large part of my time with that person in particular, so that I can hit more people on the other ways, as opposed to spending time on the person that is probably not going to make it 6 months. They've left job to job to job and just don't have the ability.
I mean, that's another massive point you just brought up, is if you can help one person and that one person can impact 1,000 people, that's then you're talked about as they'll go, oh my God, Peter, did you know what Peter used to do? Peter taught me this, that, and it's this crazy thing. But then you become this person who's really impacted a lot of lives, and in a very positive manner. So I think that's awesome.
But but when you get to the 4th person down, Peter doesn't become known.
No,
and even really the 3rd person, Peter doesn't become known. And so that's the one thing. And I heard my wife heard something on TikTok the other day. She said, and I thought it was just brilliant. She says, you got to remember that you're writing your legacy, not your obituary. And so, legacy doesn't have my name involved. It has more than that. My obituary is in printing. And so, if I gave you my resume, you'd be like, wow, look at his resume. Look at all that he's done. But 3 generations from now, they're not going to remember that, they're not going to remember some of that stuff, but I mean, think about it. Can you name all 4 first names of your great-great-grandparents? No. Or your great-grandparents? Probably not.
Well, the interesting thing is, I've thought about this theory a little bit, and you sit back there and you're like, okay, who can I name from the early, like the 1700s? Who was in the 1700s? And you're like, I don't know. And you only know the names of a select few people,
right? Because
their stories keep getting passed, like a George Washington or a Thomas Edison. And I don't even know if I'm right on the years, but you just know these people because you're like, I've heard so many stories about them. When in reality, it's the values and the lessons you learn from that is much, much more important. And it's making better people. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, who was George Washington's mentor? I mean, but he had enough of an impact that a whole country and a whole political system was kind of crafted around this. And George Washington wasn't so brilliant that he came up with all of it on his own. I'm sure some of it was from free thought, but he learned from other people as well, and we have no idea who impacted him and when he was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Just don't.
It's very, very fascinating. But I think everything you're doing is absolutely amazing. And my last question is regarding legacy. What does legacy mean to you? How often do you think about it? And what is it that you want to really leave people with?
That one, okay. So legacy used to mean a lot because legacy tied into my family name and the business and all that stuff. And everything was there. But the problem was it created angst in me because everything had to be right because I want to make certain it was passed down and this was here and and everything was about that. Once I've found Christ, once I found Christ, idea of legacy changed, and it was kind of what I was just talking about there, which is I want to pass down the values, the concepts, that type of stuff onto people. I want to help them with their lives so that they can help somebody else. And even though, again, I don't get credit for it, but ultimately, and I'm going to try to do it in a way that points back to God, but ultimately we need to have that happen so that we can, and that's where legacy is. Legacy is when you really make an impact. I guess this is probably the best way to define it. I can make an impact that I'm unaware of. I mean,
wow.
And yeah, so a lot of times we want to say legacy and then we try to, I'm going to create this gigantic trust, the Bill and Melinda Gates Trust that does, it donates all these billions of dollars to whatever it is they donate. Yeah, that's a type of legacy. And that's kind of, I think, how we think about it. But in reality is the legacy should be to places that no one has any idea that it started with you, like George Washington's mentor.
Wow. That's a very good point. The legacy is usually a financial thing, in which case when we make it much bigger than that, when it's values, the whole game changes.
Yeah, my grandfather, when he came to this country, he didn't leave a financial reward at all. He died broke. I mean, but he taught my father enough for him to be able to use it, and then my father built up some wealth that and so, but the legacy really started, really started when he came from my father. My great grandfather on my grandmother's side, he was the first restaurant person, but the legacy really came from the penniless man. That was kind of where we learned our lessons and our values from, is from that side of it. My other grandfather was a sharecropper. He picked cotton. Again, didn't make any money, but you want to talk about the value of working hard. He dropped out of third grade, school. I mean, he just had a whole lot of common sense, but worked hard and made certain that his daughter and his son, had a much better life. That's a legacy. I mean, and sometimes we also think about legacy as the quantity. It's not quantity, it's quality. And that's part of it. And sometimes our circle is smaller than others. There are people that I know that listen to your show, and there are people that you have had on your show that have a tremendously bigger area than I do. But at the same time, that I've been entrusted with my area, and that's the legacy that I have to leave. And then if I can do that, then my area starts to grow and starts to expand. But until God gives me that bigger area, I'm going to be faithful in that one.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true, that people have to show up the best that they can in their space, because at moments in time, some people are supposed to be further down or different. Not true. You're supposed to be right where you are right now. So I really, I appreciate it. This has been awesome. Where can people find you? Where can people find the book?
So you can get the book you can get the book on Amazon, is that's the buy it now button that you want to click through, or Kindle. There's an audio version of the second book. There's not one of the first one. I don't read it, so I have no idea if the guy's boring or not who read it, but I do know there's an audible version of it. You can also go to my website, and if you want me to speak to groups or event or whatever, you can also go to my website there. My website's www.peterdemas.org. and you can go straight to there. And then you can, you can contact me directly through that website, but you can also go through any of the restaurant sites, DemasFamilyKitchen.com, Demas'sRestaurant.com, PDK Southern Kitchen and Pantry.com. I mean, there's all the different ways that you can kind of access us. But for me directly, if you want to kind of deal with a book or something, have a question for me, just go straight to peterdemas.org, and you could literally send the question to me, and can't guarantee I'll answer immediately, but I'll answer in a day or two.
Awesome.
Thank you for reaching the end of the podcast. For that, we'll give you a complimentary coaching session in the link below with Edwards Consulting. Hope to see you there, and have a great day, and keep clocking in.